Hi, Bonnie Gillespie here. We are going to take a run through the tiers. I talk about this a lot in self-management for actors, but I want to make sure that it's clear. This is not hard science. It's not that there's, some king god lord of Hollywood who said, these are the tiers, and you may only pass to this point once you've done these things. This is just a representation of the trajectory of anybody's creative pursuit, and this can be translated from on-camera acting, which is the version that I'm going to give you, to stage acting, to voiceover acting, even to non-acting, writing, casting, anybody who's on a showrunner path. These are all benchmarks that can be tweaked for your creative pursuit. The first one we're going to talk about is copy credit meals. This is the one where you're working for free, basically. You are going to be submitting on projects where the pay is not even deferred. There's not even a possibility that you're going to get money in the future. It is you are doing this job for copy of the footage, very important. Credit, which means on-screen credit there in the credit scroll at the end or up front if you're one of the fancier people in the project, and on IMDb if the project ever makes it to IMDb. Regrettably, a lot of copy credit meals projects never make it to IMDb, so you're getting credit where. And then meals, meaning they feed you while you're on set, and hopefully the food is really good, because if they're not paying you, they at least should be feeding you pretty well. The important thing to note about copy credit meals level projects is if you can shape the way they fit in your brain as not being, oh, I'm giving my work away, but rather I'm investing in the apprenticeship level of my career, you tend to enjoy it a little more, and you realize that you are connecting yourself with a creative community, hopefully filled with some really fantastic people. You're, I hope, still a little selective in the folks that you choose to work with, and you make sure that they are folks that when you take a look at their IMDb Pro, you're able to see their profiles line up with where you're headed. See it as a form of advertising, and anything that you say yes to at the copy credit meals tier that isn't advertising where you're headed, meaning it's not on brand, it's not the vibe, it's not the type of work that you want to do, it's not aligned with the population with whom you'd like to work, maybe reconsider, because there's infinite opportunity to work for free and no one will ever stop asking. You could stay at this tier your entire creative life if you're not very careful. So I will encourage you to start getting strategic about this tier from the very beginning, because then you don't have to make it last much longer than it already does in a creative career. The next tier after this is where you basically go from non-union to union. You go from non-paid to paid. And of course, you can get paid non-union work. Those two things are not exact parallels. It's just those are a couple of the shifts that happen across this tier. This is the longest tier, really. It's where you go from small roles in big projects to big roles in small projects. You're doing indie films, you're doing some spec work, and spec is just a fancier way of saying copy credit meals. You may get deferred pay. Spec means that they may have some interest from a buyer and they just have to do a proof of concept before anything else, versus full-on copy credit meals where they don't have any early interest. They're just hoping something comes of it. So at this tier, a lot of actors get a little comfortable because they're getting paid for the first time. They are feeling really excited every time they get any sort of money coming in their acting career, and the projects are a little better. And because of that, they're consistently going up on IMDb. The footage is looking better and better. They can get a little lazy and complacent. Let's rebrand that word. They can get a little complacent at this tier. And it's very important that you realize the way to the next tier, and this is true for all the tiers, is knowing when to say no to the work that's flowing to you at that tier. And because just like at copy credit meals tier, at this transitional non-union to union tier, you are going to find an infinite stream of work here if you're willing to say yes to it. And so it's only when you start saying no to it that you are able to push up to the next tier, which of course we're going to use television for this one, network co-stars. This is the holy grail. This is the one that like is the entry point to the higher tiers, because that first network co-star is like getting a stamp on your passport. It's like getting a visa. It's like something that gives you entry into a space that once you're there, it's a lot easier for everybody else to take a risk on you. That's the saying. Nobody wants to be first in Hollywood. Everybody wants to be second, because the first person that believed in you really took a risk. That second person that believed in you, they just bet on a sure thing because you already, blew out the risk with the first one, which is why you always thank that first one. Even years later, you're holding up something gold and shiny. You thank me and you thank the one that believed in you first, because that was the bigger risk than the one that believed on you second or third or 10th or 3,000th time. This tier of the network co-star has a bit of legitimacy to it that doesn't exist anywhere else because of the millions of eyeballs that we're talking about being on you. So unlike low budget indie projects or even studio projects where you're in like a single scene, you are in the homes and on the gadgets of millions of people. And that level of intimacy, that familiarity really changes how your team is able to pitch you. And at this tier, you will start to have a team. Hopefully, you'll go from that hell yes level agent to one that really is kind of helping steer you to the next tier. Unfortunately, a lot of people at the co-star tier don't upgrade to a true hell yes agent, and there are certain agencies that are themselves branded as co-star tier agencies, and sometimes you can stay stuck at this tier because of your team rather than because of yourself. And so this is another place where some pruning and some no line definition becomes really important. That's important at every tier, frankly. And again, you can get very comfortable working at the co-star level. There are plenty of people who are career co-stars and they have no regrets for it, and that's fine. It's no shade on anybody who chooses to live at a certain tier. Just know that if your plan is to move ahead of it, you do have to at some point ask your team to start negotiating your billing to guest star, because that's the next tier. When you go from co-star to guest star, you are now not just larger roles, but a negotiated billing, because sometimes you can have a role of the same size at the two different tiers of negotiated billing, and that's why it's so badass to have an agent who's going to help you get that guest star billing. Going to guest star on television, and of course new media, I mean all of that as well, not just standard network television this day and age, obviously, but also you're now more consistently in studio films. Your trailers are fancier. You get invited to the premieres, whereas maybe at the tiers before they had premieres, but maybe you didn't find out about them until your Google alert went off after it happened. You're now invited to the premieres. You are certainly, if you're smart, able to leverage what's happening at this tier so that you are perceived as a higher tier actor. This is where I work with a lot of clients who are not yet ready to hire a publicist, and they're not at the tier where the network or the studio is providing a publicist or media training for them, and we kick ass working through how to navigate that film festival appearance or that step and repeat and red carpet, and the possibility of getting interviewed at the premiere, even if you're not required to do the junkets just yet, so that your photos are showing up in the stream of Getty Images and Wire Image, and of course on your IMDb profile, and these perceived higher tier activities add to the buzz, and they get your name on different lists at networks and studios, which then makes it a little easier for your agency to pitch you, for your manager to pitch you, to get you into better rooms and take better meetings, and hopefully say yes to better and better projects. Again, learning to say no to the stuff that was the tier before this is key. Now, from here, we head to the tier that is, recurring, top of show. We're series regular, series lead. I mean, this is legit. Okay, I've made it. Now everybody back home is done bugging me. It's now not just a fluke. This is like obviously my career. I'm at this tier. I'm in larger roles in studio projects. Now we can relax a little, but not so much, because here's where the hustle changes into a completely different animal. Because now, you're concerned about things like oh, I don't know, wardrobe tape and dress shields and how to negotiate getting out of a car in your little dress so that your hoo-hoo doesn't show. And, TMZ is following you. And how are you always on brand where even when they catch you going to yoga? These are things that we call champagne level problems, but the conversations that you are now having with your entire team of people includes how often are you beholden to the network or the studio with the conversations that you have. A lot of times now, when you're doing press, you are doing press as a mouthpiece of the project that paid to get you there, that paid your media training. A lot of what you're doing is now not up to you. And so if you're like, great, I can't wait to be at that tier, just be ready for it. Map out the kinds of things that are always going to be a part of brand you before you get to this space, because a lot of people start to lose themselves here, and this is where you see a lot of people having that struggle with success, that they finally got to that point, and then we go, oh, where'd they go? Why did we never hear from them again? And it chokes out here because you are now a machine for a lot of people. A lot of people are now making money off you, and that's a lot of responsibility to shoulder for someone who just a few years before was scrapping to make rent. And so the part of the reason that in self-management for actors we spend a lot of time pre-paving for the next tier is because if you don't get your head right about how all of this is going to feel, you're just going to hit that tier and then bounce out. And I don't want that for you. I pride myself on working with people who are in this for the long haul, and that I've got clients that are decades in this and decades with me in this. It is phenomenal to me to not just work with somebody who's like, oh, let me see if this acting thing's going to be a thing, and then they boomerang back out of it. It is absolutely phenomenal to me that I work with people who legit are making it and are absolutely living the dream every day. And it is through the consistent work that we start mapping out from the beginning. And so I'm going to really encourage you to do that work, even if you're like, yeah, I'll worry about that when I get there. Don't worry about it yet, but start planning for it. Prepay for that. Of course, then the final tier, which most people will never reach. Be honest with you, most people will never reach it, is the celebrity tier. Now you're a commodity for so many people. You got a team of fancy folks. Like I don't even have to tell you you're fancy because you know you're fancy. You're offer only. You got a stack of scripts that you're choosing among. You're deciding which book you're gonna option by your favorite childhood author, so that you can produce the project, whether you're in it or not. You're having mojitos and your pool boys bringing them over or whatever. I mean, all that stuff, yes. But you're now a commodity in Ulmer scale. You're on the Forbes Bankability Index. Your name, when you're attached to a project, actually cascades financing to it, and that is again a heady responsibility. And it's something that explains why people sometimes just need to take a break and do a reset, and then they'll go down to another lower tier for a minute and do a gritty indie to get back in touch with their roots. And those types of things happen because there are great responsibilities at the highest tiers. And so, really be thinking about all of that along the way. But keep in mind that first couple of tiers is a perfectly fine place to be, but it's also a place where you can get stuck if you don't cultivate the ability to make decisions that are next tier minded. So always be looking toward where you're headed, what your brand message needs to be from tier to tier, and remember to have a whole lot of fun along the way, because if it's not fun, why the hell are we doing it? I'll see you at the next tier. Mwah.